Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for your punctuality. Welcome back. Our second thematic panel, actually our first of this afternoon, our third, Food Insecurities and Sustainable Development. This session will examine some of the most pressing challenges related to poverty, food insecurity, malnutrition, sustainable development, explore how empathy and ethics of care can inform research and institutional responses to this challenge. And to begin, I'd like to invite to the stage our keynote speaker, Secretary General of Sacro and Professor of Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore, Pier Sandro Conocelli. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and very shortly you can see three different logos on my first slide. And one is SACO, our strategic alliance. The second one is Università Cattolica, where I spent almost my life as a scientist. And IASA is my new university where I moved from the 1st of June. Well, it takes some time. It is not very... Okay, we got it. So, I will try to focus on three different topics today that are strictly interconnected. First one is empathy and sustainable development. Second one is the state of the art and the threats that are in front of us. Third one, if there is any strategic solution and what is the role of us as a higher education institution. Well, empathy. We know what is empathy. It is not necessary to enter. Let me say that it is very important what as highlighted by Cardinal de Mendoza in his document on the CAT, on the Catholic University Triennale. And I think that there are some key words. One is the empathy is present at the origin of this university project and all our universities. And actually, according to the Laudato Si, and according to the Ex Corde Ecclesiae, the Apostolic Constitution, we are expected to be a body of professors and students committed to share pursuit of truth and deeply open to the totality of human knowledge. Well, so we are actually expected that educating is not merely transmitting content, it is an act of love by those who feel responsible for the present and the future of the world. And so this introduction is just to say how empathy and food security are between them interconnected. Well, point two, the state of the art. And we can immediately understand why these two topics are connected. Let me make a very short introduction. I will show you several data collected by the UN institution like FAO, IFAD, UNICEF, WHO. I will also show you some data that results from the analysis of thousands of papers. And how that is possible to do it in a feasible and period of time by using artificial intelligence. So I highly use artificial intelligence for the meta-analysis of the data that I'm going to present. Well, this is the real data, according to the FAO detection, on the state of nutrition, and in particular malnutrition, globally. And if we look at the data, are still very scaring. There is 8% of our population in the world that is malnourished, and accounts to something like between 600 million to 700 million of people. This is not evenly distributed, and there is a sort of trends, and while in most of the countries and in most of the geographical area, malnutrition is decreasing, Africa, as you can see, is fully increasing. Other Asia is more or less stable, with few exceptions. Latin America, Caribbean, only Caribbean area is radically increasing. And this led to a discussion that I will arrive later on the geopolitical situation impacting on food security. Malnutrition affects also the health of people living there. Daily means disability adjusted life years. It's a metric that is used by the Global Burden of Disease to calculate how many years of life are lost due to disease and infections. In this case, it's related to child and maternal malnutrition. And you can see there are some parts of the world, and are mainly located in Central Africa, where there is a sort of like 35% of the life that is prematurely lost due to this type of disease, because it's affecting, in particular, only the younger generation, the newborns. Situation is very complex. And actually this, we have seen yesterday, this picture. And when I entered in the basement of the beautiful villa in which we had the event yesterday evening, I immediately realized that for me it's a representation of drought and lack of water. And again, this is what is happening. And we have information, a lot of information, what is happening on the extreme heat and agriculture that is not only affecting our life because we suffer temperature and we have to switch on the air conditioning system, but actually reduce the availability of food for people in the world. Extreme heat affect the livestock production, affect the yields in agriculture, in aquaculture, so at the end there is less food for people in the world. And let me say that there are also other factors affecting the availability of food. And these are the objective of eliminating hunger. It is one of the most important pillars of the Sustainable Development Goals launched by the United Nations. And you can see the numbers are slightly different because these are the people that is suffering severe hunger, which is a bit less than people suffering malnutrition. Malnutrition is the lack of nutrient to have an active, safe life. Here is people that is severe malnourished, and you can see that we are more or less, in this moment, we have 645 in the world. That is a bit less than the 600 and something that we discussed earlier. But these are the forecasts for the future, and you can see that there are 3 different level positions. And one of them, this one, the worst, is due to conflict and war, to geopolitical situation. And this led to the first meta-analysis I did using artificial intelligence. I collected something like 1,000 of papers. All the papers were selected to be in the Q1 sector of papers, so we expect to be high-quality papers, the best on this point. And this led to us to analyze the impact of war and conflicts on the availability and access to food. In this moment, in these days, the price of cereal is radically increasing because at the end of the period of production of cereals in Europe, in the Northern Hemisphere, there is a limited amount due to the Russian invasion in Ukraine and to the limitation of transportation in the Black Sea, and price is increasing, and clearly this is affecting the most vulnerable population. In Europe, if we pay pasta in Italy, some cent more for a pack of pasta, probably we don't care, but there is a part of the population of the world that bases its main income of food on cereals. And increase of cereal, rice, wheat, is a huge problem. And okay, this is not the last version, so you have a bit more bullet point, and we try to skip off some of them to be short in presenting them, but it's clear that conflicts drive hunger. Not possible to cultivate food, to transform to food, to transport food. But also food is used as a weapon. And this is a very old story in the humanities. Food, access to food is important for controlling people. And this is very well known in Africa, in particular in non-democratic countries. Hunger, fuel instability. We all know what happened something like 20 years ago in North Africa due to the increased price of wheat and other cereals. On the other hand, generally food security supports peace, and there is a circular relationship with the availability of food and democracy, and so these are strictly interconnected, and inclusive governance matters. Democracy alone is not enough, but is a very important part, in very important aspects to maintain food security. And then, and this is not taken by artificial intelligence, but is my addition, there is also an ethical imperative. Protecting the right of food requires ensuring physical, economical, and political access, especially during war times. And this is a reflect, for instance, what is happening in Sudan, in Africa. In this case, I go immediately to the point 3, that is probably the most complex. What are the strategic solutions, and what is the role of higher education institutions? And this is a mixture of my feeling, having spent more than 40 years working on this field, but also data recently collected from high-cited journals. The first point, that there is no a consensus view. If you speak with me during lunchtime or you speak with another expert of food, we may have complete different views. And scientific evidence published on a high-quality paper often supports contrasting or conflicting approaches. Someone say, as you will see in a few minutes, we have to abolish animal food. Others say animal food is good to maintain and restore fertility of agricultural productions. And then there is a real, and for me is the main conflict of interest, and is the disciplinary background that actually shapes our decision. I work on food safety, I work on bad bacteria, and I think they are the most important part. But if someone is interested in solar energy production, you say solar energy is the saving life in the world. So we are, as scientists, and I think it's needed to make some analysis and criticism of ourselves, we are quite often guided by our discipline more than what is the reality of the situation. Transdisciplinarity, working together, developing together project is still very limited, and no universal solution fit with all contexts. What can be good in Italy maybe doesn't apply in Brazil, in Japan, or in Australia. And let me say, having worked for more than 20 years with the European policymakers, that evidence-based decisions, so based on data and science, are still very limited. Well, so what do we have to do in this situation? I think that we can have, as Catholic University, a guide, and this is the ethical perspective that is given by the Church. And although this encyclical letter has been designed for artificial intelligence, there are some keywords that I think are very important for all the scientists and researchers. And let me say, just to stolen some words from Pope Leo, building a world in which everyone can flourish requires shared responsibility and courage. And there is a call for us, as scientists, all are given their own section of the wall, scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs. So we have a call to do something of different. And again, a particular responsibility rests on the shoulders of those who work in the field of research, most of us. There are some possible solutions that are coming out from research. So could we put the brick in the wall and to play a real role in constructing the new situation of the world? For instance, this is the document from FAO that provide in tactical, strategic, and transformative view, so short time, medium time, long-term approach, solutions for resilience to extreme heat. And they provide some solutions. I would not enter in any of the technical part of these approaches. European Commission, the European government, it is providing new farming and bio-based system. And actually some of them are very, very effective in reducing biopesticide pollution and contaminations. Gene editing and agri-food system. The Nobel of Charpentier Doudin of a few years ago. They developed a system in which you can just change some of the words in the long sentences, which is DNA. And that actually opened a variety to really improve plant production and in particular in plant and microorganisms to reduce malnutrition or to produce plant varieties which are much more resilient to weather changes and more productive. And for instance, in Europe, there's just issued a new regulation and those organisms are no more considered GMOs, so can be used. But then there are some cases in which there is a lot of conflict. This is It Lancet Commission. They made in 2019 a paper, and the solution, according to them, I skip just to arrive, is to radically reduce the consumption of animal food. But then, 2-3 years later, other papers and other outstanding journals in very good, outstanding scientists in very good journals say this is not effective because human nutrition requires much more of this animal food. And on the other side, on primary production, on agriculture, the approach made by It Lancet, these study findings underscore the importance of dietary changes in tackling climate change. So you can see that at the end, a consensus is fully lacking. Just to make you an example, this is based on more than 5,000 Q1 articles. And it's a real meta-analysis, so based on data. It kept to do it less than 10 minutes using the professional ChatGPT, making by myself probably 10 years. And they analyze only good papers, and you can say this is comparison, which is a big discussion, between the organic against sustainable intensification, which is another new way for making agriculture. And if you look at several of the parameters that have been said, organic production is not the most effective. At the end, you have to, it's very good for rich people. In Italy, we are a continuous increase of consumption of organic food, and with the exception of biodiversity and pesticide reduction, but it's limited as far for 5 compared 4, you can see that at the end, in general, a policymaker would choose to use the sustainable intensified agriculture. Other solutions, a lot of discussion on journals, on newspaper, New York Times, Nature, Food, on the use of cellular food as an alternative to the production of meat and milk. These are the schemes. Just you can start from a cell or from a gene, and you can reproduce milk and meat in a biofermenter. But then when you look at them, and this is the consumption and comparison, this is the production of cow milk in terms of life cycle assessment and footprint, and this is the casein lab. This is a study that we made in my lab using a bioreactor, an industrial bioreactor, compared to our experimental farm. And the same if we use for cultivated meat, compare the meat produced in the farm. So at the end, very good ideas, very high technologies, but from environmental point of view, not very effective. Well, sometimes good ideas rise up, and this is something that we discussed. Some of you, actually, Isabel was present. It was made 1 year ago in the campus of Università Cattolica in Cremona. We put together scientists from Europe and Africa, mainly from Catholic universities, but not only from Catholic universities. The FUSE, the European Federation, was involved as well. And we discussed involving experienced scientists, or old scientists like me, and young scientists and PhD students. A lot of discussion. At the end, some ideas rise up. Non-single solution, nutrition plus sustainability, people-centered innovation, empower communities, women and young farmers is fundamental, transdisciplinary matters, university as a catalyst, very important, and North-South co-creation, ethics and solidarity. So this led me to the final conclusion. This is the... I said the long version, but it is not a long version. It is already a synthesis of what I collect. So since I care of you, I make something that is readable for all of you. And it's much easier, we can discuss it. So first point, and this is really my personal view, analyzing these thousands of papers, and also from my experience. There is not a single solution to solve malnutrition. We need an integrated and context-specific strategy. We have to use science as a guide, and this is really a limitation. In particular now, things like the vaccine and vaccinations. If we just go up north some 1,000 kilometers, measles is killing people, which is fully crazy just because there is a crazy Minister of Health. Put nutrition and access at the center, not think only on the yields. We don't need only calories, we need the protein. So modify the production in agriculture to produce something that ensures sufficient, safe and nutritious diets. We have to combine production with sustainability and resilience. We cannot not take care of our common home, but on the other side we have to produce food to reduce malnutrition. We have to strengthen the full food system. My new university is working at the moment in 9 model farms in Africa. The major problem in collaboration with the African governments. And the major problem, we have already produced this year a lot of tons of soybean, but then where are the facilities to transform soybean in a food? And the same for other products. Recognize conflict as a major driver for hunger. And remember that they can turn food access into a weapon. Invest in people as much in this technology. And this is our role as university. Use AI, new technologies, and open knowledge responsibly. And we have to be transparent in what we do and having an ethical and accessible approaches. Make university catalyst for transdisciplinarity and North-South co-creation. This is really fundamental. We have learned a lot in the meeting with colleagues from African countries. They told me this example. We have been passed from the no telephone to the smartphone. You have made the first telephone, the one with the ring, with the circle, with the numbers, then the one with the, you have to clip it, and then the first StarTAC telephone, and then the first, so we had all these steps. They want to skip step of this evolution. They don't want to be proportional in new technology. They want immediately to arrive at technologies that are effective. Promote justice, empathy, and solidarity. And you can see that we go at the theme of this meeting. Empathy, it is at the center in the relationship between different countries, different social groups, different ethical, ethnic groups, and so on. And so to conclude, and to open the discussion, I prepared a sort of take-home message. Responsibility cannot rest on one actor alone. That's the reason why years ago we decided to create a network of Catholic University to share ideas and to develop a project together. And as Pope Leo emphasized, building a world in which everyone can flourish requires shared responsibility and courage. So in this moment, we have to build the section of the wall. But on the other side, we have to broken some wall. And this wall is the still low permeability between disciplines in universities. I'm sure that in all of our universities, there is a wall between one discipline to another. And some of us is a vice rector, a rector, and we have been in this contact with several areas of our university, and we know that it's very, very difficult to keep people from our sciences to have a dialogue with someone that is not. So the challenge is not to produce more food or better technologies, but to build a food system where scientific progress, evidence-based approaches, ethical responsibility, empathy, and solidarity enable everyone to flourish. And the key question is how SACO can effectively contribute. And this is the point of view. And I would conclude with the name of this meeting. It is a colloquium, and we decided years ago to call them colloquium. It's not a workshop. In a workshop, you work. In a colloquium that derives from Latin is cum loqui. It means with words. It means talking together. And I think this is the most important message for us, to start talk together to find solutions. Thank you very much for your attention. I have to stay here?
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Piesandro, for this detailed presentation. And I'll now invite to the stage the panelists of this session, the chairperson of this session, coordinator of Central Office for Graduate Studies and Research at PUC-Rio, Professor Marco Cremona. The roundtable participant, Director of Electronics Engineering Department at Pontifícia Universidade Javeriana, Professor Julian Colorado. Professor at the Faculty of Biotechnology at the Universidade Católica Portuguesa, Professor Marta Vasconcelos. And Professor at the Institute of International Relations at PUC-Rio, Professor Paulo Esteves.
So good. Thank you very much for the nice presentation, Piesandro. Also, if the conclusion is a lot of things to read, so it's complicated, but I think that is a very starting point. I just put something here in my paper, but I would like to start with the lady. Yes, because you have also some presentation here, so I think that is better to you to present. So do you have already the presentation? So I would like just to invite you to comments, eventually something about the talk of Piesandro, and to give your ideas about this. Okay? Thank you. You have a microphone there. Yeah.
This is a lot to hold.
A lot of things, yeah.
If I had 3 hands, it would be great.
But eventually you can ask to change if you don't want to have a lot of things.
In fact,
okay.
There are very few slides, and it's just images, very illustrative images to try to make you more engaged about the narrative. I hope it works. And I just put them up maybe an hour ago. So I will offer my perspective as a scientist that works on agriculture, on food production, on genetics, and on nutrition. And for me, and as mentioned before in this great keynote talk, I really enjoyed it. The dominant food security challenge right now is not simply producing calories. We've historically been producing calories per hectare, and I truly believe we need to be moving from calories per hectare to nutrients per hectare. and especially diverse nutrients per hectare. It's also the main challenge to access healthy diets and resilience in food systems, as previously mentioned. And it was great to see the good perspectives for Latin America and for the Caribbean. In fact, they are one of the few regions in the world that have been quite good at reducing food insecurity. However, it's also the region where the cost for a healthy diet is the highest in the world. And so we have a lot of situations of contradiction and inequalities, and for this I think empathy has a very big role to play. And I will try to argue with 6 very brief case studies on how I feel empathy across the food system can have a role to play. Well, why? Because for me, empathy should really be perceived as a framework. So I would like to see empathy as a framework for understanding and responding to the interconnected needs of all these food system actors. So everybody needs to be heard, and as mentioned before, and this dialogue is oftentimes very difficult, very contradictory. I work with a lot of very large-scale European projects where we have sociologists and agriculturalists and nutritionists trying to speak the same language, and it's often very, very difficult, but also really rewarding when we can make it work. And because why sustainable transitions, in fact, can only occur when these perspectives are acknowledged and are also integrated. And so I will speak a little bit from nutrients to systems, and I will argue across empathy across these 6 dimensions. And I would start by asking the audience here, do you have any idea what you're seeing? For me, it is art. But I can imagine that it's quite difficult for you to realize what this is, but it's actually the product of a 4-year PhD, my PhD in this case, and it's a grain of rice. It's a grain of rice that's been cut transversely. And here on my right side, on your left side, you see that the grain is brown, and you see some blue staining around the rice grain. Also, that's localizing iron. Iron anemia affects 30% of the world's population. It's been that way for ages. And rice is extremely poor in iron. However, it feeds 1/3 of our world's population. And my idea at the time was, what if I can make rice nutritious for iron? And so what you can see on the right, this is a genetically modified rice where I integrated a gene. And this gene is being expressed in the inside of the grain, and now you see the iron located across the whole grain, don't you? And this is important because we mostly eat white rice, polished rice. So when we polish our wild rice, we remove the vestigial iron that's there. So here I'd like to argue for the first empathy, which is empathy for scientists. And why? Because I was a young scientist. I had a lot of ambition, and I was I dreamt of a better future, more nutrition. This was for Africa, by the way. However, this rice never reached consumers' shelves. And that's because biotechnology solutions are oftentimes tied up in very strict regulations and policies. In particular in Europe, it's not approved, the consumption of transgenic foods. And I would like to argue that scientists are generally poor, but we have good intentions. And we need to also support scientists when they're trying to do the better good, not for the global north and the wealthy populations, but also and especially for those in need. And I'd like to argue that if my rice had been made to cure male baldness, it would now be in European shelves. This is my thought. I don't know, I've never studied this, but I believe that this could be so. So this is my first empathy for scientists, and also empathy for not financing and supporting technologies that are actually not going to benefit you directly, but having the foresight of thinking for a better good. So then my next example here, these are bananas. Here I would like to ask for empathy for those that don't have a voice. And in this case, it's seeds and genetic diversity. Because oftentimes we think that we live in a world that's full of variety. We think we are eating a lot of variety because our great-grandparents didn't have access to avocado or to exotic foods, whereas now we have access to sushi and all these different types of foods that we didn't have before. However, if you think about it, we are all eating the same things across the globe. And not just the same foods, but the same varieties of the crops that are giving rise to these foods. And why banana? There are thousands, and we were speaking about this at dinner yesterday, there are thousands of wonderful varieties of banana. However, the market is dominated by one variety, 80% of the market, Cavendish banana. And this creates an enormous vulnerability and food insecurity, because if there's a disease, and it has arrived, by the way, bad news. It's called the Panama disease. It's a fungus, and it's decimating banana production. So here I'm arguing for empathy for biodiversity. And I think this aligns also very much with the concept of integral ecology and the Laudato Si, and being mindful that these varieties hold treasures in terms of climate resilience and traditions and culture. Okay, I know I only have 5 to 10 minutes. I will try to be brief. Okay, so this is my farm. I'm also a small-scale farmer, and I would like to argue for empathy towards farmers. I don't know the situation in Brazil, but in Europe, farmers are receiving a huge amount of backlash. They are being considered the villains of food systems because they produce with too much nitrogen, too many fertilizers, chemicals, herbicides. And when I bought my farm, I came with lots of ideas on how to farm better. I wanted my farm to be organic. I wanted to stop utilizing any types of products. And then I met Mr. Guedes and Dona Ana. Mr. Guedes is actually the small-scale farmer that lives in Amarante, where this farm is, and he's been running this farm for decades. And he taught me a lesson of humility, because as soon as the city lady decided to implement her strategies, I didn't have wine that year, and fruits, barely any. So we really need to listen and be empathetic towards everybody, including these treasures of knowledge, like these small-scale farmers that know much more than sometimes we give them credit for. The next is the industry. Even though sometimes they're also villains in certain contexts, the industry is navigating through a crisis of dualities. We need to produce better foods, we need to produce with low environmental impact, we need this to be healthy, but then we make a bean-based burger full of additives. That's really not much more healthy than a regular burger. So the industry is also needing some empathy and knowledge, and this dialogue between us can be very, very important. And then consumers. We must be empathetic towards consumers, because more than ever, consumers are subjected to a lot of misinformation, and including in social media, and navigating through all these mixed messages is hard. We need to really dialogue better and give better messages to consumers. And finally, last but not least, I would argue policymakers. Policymakers are as much in trouble as everybody else. They have to come up with policies that are coordinated across the food system. And a policy that promotes production oftentimes is contradictory to consumption. I'll give you an example. We want more legume production in Europe. And so we import 70% of our legumes, and we want less meat consumption. But then, do you know where these legumes are going? Are they going for human food No, animal feed. So we promote more legumes, not to feed humans, but to feed animals, animals that we don't want to eat as much. So it's a big conundrum. And also the European agricultural policy told Europe what they should grow. Portugal was autonomous in legume production for 80%, but then we were told we need to produce maize for cows and dairy. And now we are investing in policies to bring back the legumes. So it's a wild world, and we all need to really have better ideas and discussions. So I think I will end with that. I just want to say, to end, that I had here a beautiful finale. Somewhere in one of these pages. Yeah, so, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. That empathy should be really embedded across contexts for food security, for scientists facing budget constraints and disbelief by big audiences, for farmers facing climate change struggles and economic pressures, for consumers needing affordable and healthy diets, for ecosystems which are affected by agricultural practices, for policymakers and for industry, for balancing sustainability and economic development and trying to make ends meet, and for future generations who will inherit today's food system. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Marta, for this this nice view, or complex view now of the. So it's not a simple work, it's a simple job to do, because I saw in your empathies, listing of different empathies is contradictory something in some place, some for the industry, for the scientists. I like the idea of empathy for scientists, but there is some other obstacles that we met when we think about some new idea or something like that. And also about the biodiversity. This is a very interesting point, because really we normally every day we eat the same thing, practically. For me, that I am Italian as Pier Sandro, sometimes we try to think about our food or something that we taste in the past, and something of that is not more the same thing, or some fruit is not more available. So this idea, the banana is something like that, but also coffee, for example, for the Julian that probably knows better than other people. The problem with coffee is another problem with variety. Here, for example, in Brazil now and in other parts of the world, the people just use the Arabica as the Arabica was the better thing. This is not true. So, but this is because the market puts the idea that the Arabica is the better grain. So there is a lot of work to do, really. So I will pass the word to Julian Colorado from Javeriana, and please. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for the invitation, and I love to hear that expression, the sentence in which nutrition. We need to start thinking about nutrition per acre rather than producing more food, because at the end it's an optimization problem, and it's very. There is a question that I would like to raise here, and food waste. It's some kind of a overlooked problem. We are not taking into consideration the amount of waste that we generate from food systems, and there is not a good connection in between production and consumption, right? And this optimization problem, I remember a story a couple of years ago, actually 5 years ago. The Rockefeller Center was trying to put an initiative in the world that is called PTFI. I don't know if you ever heard about it. It's called the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. And it all started 5 years ago in 2021. And the Rockefeller Center, the main goal of that project was to try to create a periodic table similar to the elements, gold, aluminum, but for food, trying to go to the basis, the foundation of our food, cereals and other kind of substance, and try to come out with the entire composition of those elements in the food. In order to produce food that is with a nutritional value for our society. And all started with this story. In the Rockefeller Center, they go to a grocery and bought an apple. I don't know if you ever heard about this story before, but they bought an apple, okay, in the supermarket, and they sliced the apple in 5 pieces. A normal apple that you go to the store to buy. And they send these independent pieces of the apple to the top 5 genetic laboratories in the world in order to come out with the full composition for that piece of an apple, okay? They goes, and these top 5 laboratory universities in the world try to come out with the food composition analysis, all the metabolomics and running genetics and things like that. And the correlation between this end table in between among the 5 laboratories, no more than 3%. 3%. So every single laboratory came out with a different table try to go deeper into an apple. So it makes me think that we have no idea, we really have no idea where we are eating. Of course we know, but at the end, if we try to optimize those things, we need to start thinking from the bottom up, and genetics, and try to do food systems like a Lego, in which we have some parts that we understand the genomics, all the atoms involved in that genome sequence, and then trying to go up in order to have new varieties and new food that is optimal in terms of nutrition. And this is a very interesting work that we're conducting in Javeriana. It turns out that the Rockefeller invite us to be part of this initiative through the Omics Institute in Javeriana University. We had both campuses, one in Bogota and the other in Cali, in the city of Cali. And in this institute, we are trying to run or to come out with an approach in order to use the omic sciences in order to have some kind of to tackle these challenges that we have as humans. And the omic sciences, okay, try to do the entire omic science applied to a living organisms like food, right? And using genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, way up to the phenotype, which is the physical representation of these varieties or different traits that people in genomics try to do, as you just mentioned before, with the rice, and come out with a new variety that is able to to eliminate, for example, ions and other particles through the roots, or that can tolerate dry soils or climate change. And we need to start thinking about how to get optimal technologies in order to deploy this into the real world. And I was thinking that in this problem, we also, for sure, the big picture is very complicated because it's not only a food production problem, nutrition, optimization, waste, but also, of course, economic, and we have a governance problem, right? And because in most countries, we have the food, but somehow, because of this economical and social issues, this food cannot go to anywhere as we want it to do. And they start thinking about connecting with empathy, right? And we were just thinking about how empathy is extremely related to, we're talking about emotions and feelings, but perhaps we need to go further than that because, and there is a word that I haven't heard in this conversation today, is character, right? And character goes beyond temporary feelings, compassion, or maybe injustice that we see, suffering. Those things can be limited to a certain period of time, but character is a long run. In order to form character in a person, it's a long run. It doesn't depend on the moment or what we see and experience in a period of time. And we as universities and in academia in general, we need to start thinking how we can contribute to form character in order to tackle these things. And with the food waste, going back to this topic, I will, before producing more food, I will like to raise this question that we should first, well, reduce the amount of food that never reach consumers. We start thinking, starting in that point, and this is something that maybe this character thing is something that we need to start forming in our programs and in our discussions with students in every single discipline, because at the end, this is a very transdisciplinary work that we have to conduct here. And just to finish, I would like to pass to the other slide. This is two slides just to show you, okay, this is the approach that we have at the Institute with the omics, how we can take a living organism and try to do the multi-omics studies to come out with solutions, not only from that genomic perspective, but also at the end with the real crop. And the other one, please. And this is, for example, the technologies we are very passionate about trying to come out with technologies that are cheaper to small local producers, right? And this is a very nice prototype that we have. This is a bio-nanosensor. It costs now in production $1. And what we want to have is, with this $1 device, we can actually measure in real time different analytes from the plant. We can sense plant metabolism in real time. So suppose that, for example, we have tested this in rice and other type of production. And in rice, for example, there is a virus called the hoja blanca virus. There is affecting rice in general. In Colombia, in particular, we have this problem. And as is in the same way that when we get infected by a virus, the virus goes in our organism, but after maybe 4 or 5 days, we start having physical responses of the virus, right? We start feeling bad, but the virus is being in our organisms to 5 to 6 days earlier. What we want to do with this is, with this sensor, we can measure what's going on with the plant internally before physically in the phenotype it starts doing changes about biotic or abiotic stresses that are affecting the crop system. And inside the sensor, we have, of course, this is a layer, a graphene. This is a very nice material that is used for building this nanosensor. And we can characterize, we can set different nanosensors to measure a specific variable, like glucose in plants, for example. And since it's $1, we can build an entire network of sensors that can be deployed in several acres of a crop system in order to have information. And this is amazing because we can have technologies now that people that work in genomics and other try to come out with a new traits and a new variety that fights against this virus. Now, with these elements, using remote sensing and these nanosensors, they can start correlating genomic data against the phenomics and what's going on with the real crop and the variety that just have created. So this is an example of the technologies that now we are working. in the institute. And for the final slide, thank you. This is another example of a project. And the other point here is that climate change is also extremely related to this challenge of food insecurity, or food security. Because it's both, climate change is both a cause and a consequence. They are both. Because both agriculture itself contributes significantly with greenhouse gas emissions, right? That in turn start to create drought and water problems, floods, extreme temperatures, as we have seen, and of course start reducing the agricultural productivity. So in this project, what we have is, this is a very nice project from Bezos, funded by the Bezos Earth Fund that we have in the Institute, and we are trying to measure methane emissions from birds, from cattle, or from the birds. So from the air rotation of the cows, right? So it turns out that Bezos have made a global study, and the most amount of green gas, the methane that is produced by the entire livestock system is from the burps of the cows. So we are come up with a device that we can sense the methane emissions coming from birds, from the nose in particular of these animals. And there is other team working in genetics in order to go to try to make a genome editing to pasture, in order that this new pasture cannot produce the bacteria that generate methane within the cow itself. So it's a very nice initiative that in which we can contribute in order to have these technologies that really can give us a clue or a sense about what's happening with these contaminants. So okay, so this is the presentation, and thank you very much.
Julian, thank you very much for the presentation. Also because you touch in an issue that is more familiar for me, because I'm from physics. So this kind of sensor we build here with graphene and other organics materials. So this is something that we can start to collaborate eventually. And this is a point of contact eventually for our discussion later. And I will just pass the speak to Paolo. Okay, thank you very much. He's a professor from here, from PUC-Rio. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Thanks, Carmona, and thanks for the invitation. Let me start stating from where I'm going to talk. I'm a political scientist, and I'm talking from the perspective of international politics. So I'm approaching the problem in a very different way, perhaps closer to Professor Coconcelli. Even though you're from another area, I think the concerns that we discuss, they touch each other. So the points that I'm gonna raise in a way, they touch some of the concerns that you raised, Professor. Let me start reiterating two figures that Professor Coconcelli presented, and these figures are coming from this year's report, State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World. In 2025, 645 million people went hungry. This is more or less 7.8% of the humanity. These figures show the third consecutive annual decline. The situation of hunger is declining year after year. There is real progress, and we should say so plainly. However, it still represents a shocking and scandalous figure. In the same year, 2.69 billion people, very nearly 1 in 3 persons on the planet, could not afford a healthy diet. A healthy diet now costs $4.28 per person per day. Not much, right? In Latin America, this number raises a little bit to $4.91 per day, per person per day. It's not much, but let's remember that approximately 800 million people live on less than $3 a day. And a health diet costs $4.90 per day. And almost half of the world's population live below the line of $8.3 per day, $8.30 per day. This is the line of countries like Brazil, upper middle income countries. But if you consider the population, the size of the population that lives in upper middle income countries, you're going to see that almost half of the population of the world live only with $8 per day. And the meal and the healthy diet costs, again, $4 per day. The gap defining food security is shifting in the FAO, FAO. I don't know how to say that in English. In Brazil, we use in Portuguese FAO. FAO always defined food security by availability and access. And they are shifting now to include availability and affordability. And they are pairing affordability to availability in order to access. Affordability became, in FAO's reports, a condition for access. The decisive question then becomes institutional. So we are talking about prices. We are talking about policies that will set these prices. Otherwise, the market will set the prices, and we are going to reproduce something that we already have. And the question is, under what conditions do scientific capabilities that we are discussing here, one way or another, and the production outcomes become affordable diets? How can we make scientific progress turn into affordable diets? Of course, I won't provide a final answer here. I won't dare. But we can try to find a way. And before doing so, I wanna raise two caveats or two examples of the problems we are going to face. The first one is that availability does not ensure affordability. Brazil is an enlightening case here. Brazil left the FAO hunger map in 2025, and severe food insecurity in this country fell from 6.6% of the population to 3.4%. Since while on that map, the country was already among the world's leading exporters of food. So a country which is a leading exporter of food was in the hunger map, in the FAO's hunger map. We can conclude then that that output does not explain why it returned to the hunger map in the first place. Income transfers, school meals, public procurement from family farming, and the reactivation of a national food security system did this work. It's not about the outcome, it's about the public policies that will ensure access through affordability. The fragility of these policies' outcomes deserves equal attention. Brazil left the same map in 2014. 2014 was the first time that Brazil left the hunger map and returned to this map in 2022. The lesson here is that what policy builds, policy can also dismantle. The second caveat is that innovation alone does not ensure access. Precision agriculture, remote sensing, agri-food data are adopted across a highly unequal landscape, reproducing and sometimes deepening such inequality despite increased food availability. Science can actually make food more available, but this does not mean that we are going to eat it. Unless the institutions that govern access, ownership, and adaptation are carefully designed otherwise, scientific innovation may not contribute for food security. And I'm not saying that scientific innovation, I'm really empathic towards scientists. I'm not saying that scientific innovation is not important. On the contrary, what I advocating here is that giving these two caveats, we can conclude that ensuring food security requires pairing scientific innovation with redistributive policies. These policies should be embedded within an institutional framework that safeguards them from political instability. Policies does not work well when we have a political unstable landscape or situation, as we have all over the place now, all over the shop. Latin America, for instance, is it's a mess. I lost myself, sorry. This policy should be embedded within an institutional framework that safeguards them from political instability. An instrument already exists that takes both lessons seriously, and its architecture matters for what I'm gonna propose here. And this instrument is the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, created under Brazil's G20 presidency and launched in Rio de Janeiro in November 24. The alliance has grown from 148 founding members to more than 200 members now. Members join one of the three pillars through statements of commitment. And the three pillars are the national pillar, which carries country-led plans drawing on a policy basket of carefully evaluated instruments and now we have 9 national plans already endorsed and 14 other plans in preparation. The financial pillar aligns domestic and international resources, public and private, in order to fund these plans. The knowledge pillar gathers academic and research institutions that supply the evidence on which the other two, financial and the national, the other two pillars depend. A support mechanism at FAO coordinates the three. FAO coordinates the three pillars. The national and financial pillars are moving. 9 projects already endorsed, 14 in the pipeline. The financial pillar is mobilizing, of course, not enough funds, but mobilize some funds to support these plans. But the knowledge pillar remains the thinnest of the three. And that is where I think 9 research universities, 9 research Catholic universities with territorial presence on 4 continents could contribute. And the 3 proposals I have follow this path, one for each pillar. The first one is that SACRU could assess the possibility or could discuss the possibility of joining the knowledge pillar as a network rather than 9 separate institutions. And with one named deliverable attached to the application. The application may be a difficult task. The University of Oxford was already presented as the representative of all universities in the world in the global alliance, but the University of some universities in Brazil, University of Brasilia and University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, they are part of the network, and there are points of contact with Oxford itself that could allow us to work together with them if we decide so. The second proposal is related to the national pillar. SACRU universities could develop and raise funds together to create an affordability observatory following FAO's methodology. We could apply the FAO cost and affordability methodology to the territories where our universities actually sit. I'm talking about the cities and perhaps the provinces. And we could publish the results together and openly. The existing global reports like FAO or IFAD, they are either global or regional. They never go to the territories. And the territories is where we actually live. And the universities which are territorialized, they could play a role here. The existing global report, the existing global reports present national and regional averages, so subnational measurement is precisely what it cannot deliver. And 9 universities together would constitute a comparative data infrastructure feeding the policy basket. The third proposal, for the financial pillar, our alliance could work, and I'm talking here as a political scientist, of course. It's a very different way to look at the problem, I know. Our alliance could work on a map of the value chains implicated in the food security agenda. The data is already available. Professor Coconcelli presented some of them. The data is available at the United Nations, at FAO, OECD, and WTO. But it has never been assembled around this question. Such a map would consider the geopolitical competition, would show where the value settles and where the vulnerability concentrates. 4 firms, just as an example, 4 firms hold 56% of the commercial seed market. 56% of the commercial seed market belongs to 4 companies. And 61% of pesticides. 14 choke points. Among these choke points, of course, we can find Hormuz. 14 choke points of systemic importance carry the grain trade. So the grain are crossing, and this is one of the points that Professor Coconcelli also raised, are crossing these choke points. And some of the choke points are in our country, just so the Brazilians know. Some of the choke points are, for instance, the roads that we have in these countries. They are considered choke points because they are really bad and they can be stopped, they can be closed in every time by the truck drivers, for instance. At the 2022 peak, export restrictions covered roughly 1/10 of the calories in the world trade. Affordability at the table is decided at these points quite as much as in the field. So the third proposal is precisely to map these value chains and provide information about how to create access, to create value, and to extract value and make sure that people actually have the food and the healthy diet they need. Empathy must be translated into recognition, but should not stop there. Institutionalized, empathy drives the design of fair policies and mobilizes the necessary resources to implement them, turning recognition into representation and redistribution, and perhaps contributing to providing food security for those always left behind. Thank you.
Paolo, thank you very much, Paolo, no, don't worry. It's okay. Also because you make some actions that I think that 3 actions, and one of them I think that is interesting because when you speak about the territory, is the nature of our university. We call the PUC-Rio as a universidade comunitaria, so common university, community university. So this makes that we are more also not interested, but we have a very root in the structure of our community, our territory, and so on. So I think that is a very good idea. So now I would like to open for just to don't have just we to speak, to open some discussion of the room. Okay, just there is one. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for this enlightening presentation. I have a question. I like what you said at the end, because even empathetic intentions have to pass through institutions. And I was wondering how to do that. You gave us a clue on how to do it with our network, which is very inspiring. But at the end, we have to translate this individual disposition for empathy into institutional arrangements in general, governments, even markets. So my question is, and I know it's a difficult question and it could take hours, but how can we take steps towards translating those empathetic dispositions into institutional arrangements in this climate. You mentioned it, the Latin American political situation right now is very tense. So any ideas? Because at the end, I think empathy can be more effective in distributing food than in deciding how much food to produce.
Thank you.
I try to make a very simple answer. At first, it's very difficult to answer, so there is no simple answer. But how we can contribute? SACO has one working group that in the last year has worked on the food system. It works pretty well. We did connection with FAO. We also made a meeting in FAO with a small congress having people. And first, Secretary General of SACO, I will ask you three to join this working group because all your views are extremely important. Second, there is a limitation. And actually, that stopped the connection with FAO because one of the answers, Andrea, is that we can work with supranational institutions. And FAO is willing to work with a network university which is so widely distributed in the planet. There is a limitation that at this moment we are not a real we are a network, but there is no a structure in terms of legal entity to create a work with FAO. That's the reason why our president, Isabel, is promoting the idea to make a step up in the SACO activities by having a new legal personality that can allow us to work, because FAO has been a lot of contact. Clearly, being FAO in Rome, it's easier for an Italian to go there, and the vice president, the deputy director general of FAO, and I hope the new president, it is a PhD student, a former PhD student. It's a PhD graduate from my university. So we had several contacts, but the problem was an internal problem of SACO. But they are really willing to have contact with regional areas, and Latin American for them is one of the most relevant. And this is the first point. Then there is a second point. I close my presentation saying what we can do. I think that Paolo's suggestion, don't call me Professor Coconcelli, because I'm Pier Sandro, it's easier. It is absolutely three very good ideas, because our suggestion in how to move at the next step of this alliance. So moving, creating something, to have also a political role in the sense that providing the scientific evidence to policymakers, to supranational institutions on huge problem. And then, at the end, Julian talked about omics. That's my field, where I play with DNA, transcriptomics, genomics. Clearly, we can provide also very good science. And again, the reason of this meeting is also to create connections, so I'm sure that we can in future collaborate on this point.
So we have time just for other two questions. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry.
No, it's very quick contribution from my end. I think one thought could be to organize a policy paper, just a very simple policy paper around this thematic, and then whoever would like to contribute could join the group and outline the content of the position paper and then get it out there. But from my experience, it's extremely difficult to engage with policymakers towards making them understand the science. So these messages must be very simple and very clear. And in every research project that I'm involved in, we always have a policy work package, and we try to engage with the policy officers from the European Commission, and they hardly show up at our meetings. So there's a lot of lobbying that needs to be done, and not all of us are professional lobbyists for these topics. So maybe there should be a more professionalized lobbying mechanism, because it's important. And and try to bring them in as much as possible, have budget to invite them for meetings, and offer some pluses, and sometimes they come. Yeah, so that's my thoughts.
Pablo?
I think part of the work is being done in our universities. Perhaps we have to connect the work that we are doing in different fields and see what kind of actionable knowledge we can actually mobilize. This is one. The second one is something that Julia said. This is it's capital intensive and labor intensive, very, very intensive. We are talking about following the processes. So we have FAO's assembly, we have the G20 conferences, we have the T20 conferences, which are the conferences of the think tanks. So to influence the global agenda is something that something that requires a kind of fund that our universities alone do not have, but they can prepare a project. And the proposals that I made was the proposals that I made were basically to create some products that could both influence policymaking and second, to attract funders as well. So the idea of using a metric for affordability in our cities is something that we can have a barometer or an observatory or something like that. And the map of the global value chains, stating the problems of the value chains and how these value chains generate food insecurity at the end of the day is something that would be some kind of a public good. And with that, we can actually approach some foundations, some potential donors, and raise the money together to fund a joint project. With these resources, we can start thinking about go to London next year, because the United States, well, this G20 already passed. We can go to London next year. We can go to COP. We can participate in international fora, so we can try to influence international decisions as well.
Thank you, Paulo. There are some other... Isabel, please. You arrive with the microphone.
I just wanted to thank you for the panel, and I wanted to react to this last part, because this is precisely what this network can actually do. It's not about inventing. We do sound research. We have data. We just need to coordinate and organize on a structural level, institutionalize this. And I would say we have to scale up the working group, which is doing great work, but scale it up to something that can be really offered as a policy package. And the movement that we are now doing into transforming SACRU into an association will provide the legal pathway to attract specific funding for this project. So far, we have been funding the network with the funds of the several universities. This kind of work doesn't need a lot of millions, but it needs funding, and funding that is readily available. We also know where to find it, but we just need that structure. So thank you very much. I think this is going to be one of the questions tomorrow in our governing board meeting. So I think this panel was truly very, not only inspiring, but I think it's a call to action that we need to act upon. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Isabel. So there are other questions or comments? No? Okay. Sorry? No, it's so you. Just to finish, but I would like to invite everyone tomorrow, because we have this group dynamic with this kind of ideas. I think that is exactly what we need to do tomorrow morning. Yeah. Okay. So with this, I think it's finished our session now. So thank you very much again, all the participants and the public.
Yeah, thank you very much for our speakers, chairs, participants for today's discussions. The group will take an official photo. Yes, and Meanwhile, I'd like to thank the audience, everyone who stayed here with us. We hope the conversations will continue beyond this room. And tomorrow morning, we will continue with 2 further thematic panels and a plenary at the afternoon with the dynamic to our call to actions. So thank you for joining us today. We wish you a pleasant evening and look forward to welcome you tomorrow. Good evening. Yes. We have a visit planned today with the Vicky Muniz studio. The group could join outside and the vans will take you. Thank you so much.